Welcome to Decode Station. I'm Sarah. For decades, we thought we understood how civilization began. First came agriculture, then settlements, then religion. But what if we had the order completely wrong? In southeastern Turkey, archaeologists uncovered a site so old, so unexpected, that it forced historians to rethink the origins of civilization itself. Today, we're exploring Göbekli Tepe.
And it really is the ultimate historical disruptor. I mean, our mission for this deep dive is to look at the hard evidence from this one specific site and trace exactly how it, completely shattered our entire established timeline of human history.
Right.
We're going to walk through the initial discovery, the frankly impossible scale of the architecture, the mechanics of how it was actually built, and the revolutionary theory that just flips the script on how we, as a species, actually became civilized.
Yeah, and to really understand the magnitude of this disruption, we kind of need to set the scene for you listening. So we are in southeastern Turkey, near a city called Şanlıurfa.
Beautiful area.
It really is. The landscape there is arid, it's rolling, and it feels very ancient. It's the kind of terrain that holds its secrets incredibly well. But the story of how we actually found this specific site, Göbekli Tepe, is just bizarre.
It really is.
Like, it wasn't unearthed by some sudden, dramatic Indiana Jones expedition. It was actually first identified way back in the 1960s.
Yeah, by a joint team from the University of Chicago and Istanbul University.
And they just walked right over it, took a few notes, and then completely walked away.
And they left it completely untouched for decades. I mean, the original survey team, they noticed a hill covered in broken limestone slabs and a massive scattering of flint tools. But, they looked at that evidence through the lens of what they already believed about history.
They had a massive blind spot.
Exactly. They assumed the limestone slabs were just the remains of a medieval Byzantine cemetery.
Yeah.
And the flint tools, they thought they were just from some small temporary camp. It didn't fit the expected pattern of what an important world-changing archaeological site should look like at the time, so they just moved on.
It's a perfect example of paradigm blindness. It's like handing a smartphone to someone from the 1800s.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Right, because they wouldn't know to tap the screen or swipe. They'd probably just use it as a shiny paperweight, because the whole concept of software or digital technology simply doesn't exist to them yet. The 1960s archaeologists didn't have the conceptual framework to even recognize what they were standing on, because back then they firmly believed early humans were simple wanderers, totally incapable of massive stonework.
Right, and that framework dictated their physical actions in the field. If you are operating under a strict set of rules about what early human history looks like, you only see what confirms those rules. You simply aren't looking for a massive, complex site from an era when humans weren't supposed to be building anything.
Because it shouldn't exist.
It shouldn't exist.
Yeah.
And it took a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt arriving in 1994, looking at the exact same dirt but asking completely different questions, to finally scratch the surface. He realized the flint scatter wasn't just a camp, it was the debris of a massive ancient workshop. And when he dug past the topsoil, what he found literally defied every single textbook.
Let's talk about what he hit when he dug down, because this is where the timeline of human history gets entirely upended. The shockwaves in the archaeological community really came down to two undeniable factors: the age of the site and the scale.
Yeah.
Radiocarbon dating puts the very earliest construction of Göbekli Tepe at roughly 9600 BCE.
Which means, we were looking at a site that is over 11,000 years old.
Over 11,000 years. I really want to pause here and put that timeline into perspective for you, because 11,000 years is a number so vast that human brains tend to just slide right off it.
We can't really conceptualize it.
No, we can't. To translate that into human experience, we are talking about a world well before the last woolly mammoths went extinct. Think about Stonehenge. We think of Stonehenge as the ultimate ancient monument, right?
Right.
Göbekli Tepe is roughly 7,000 years older than Stonehenge.
It's a staggering gulf of time. It stretches our understanding of antiquity to the absolute breaking point.
It does. It's significantly older than the Egyptian pyramids. In fact, if you map out the timeline of human existence, the people who built the Great Pyramid of Giza are closer to us in time than they were to the people who built Göbekli Tepe.
Wow.
That is the sheer depth of history we are standing in right now.
And, well, The age alone is remarkable, but the age combined with the scale is what makes the site such a massive anomaly.
Mhm.
Because when we say an archaeological site from 11,000 years ago, the traditional expectation is fire pits.
Right, some charred wood.
Yeah, maybe some bone needles or sharpened stones used for scraping animal hides. Instead, Klaus Schmidt's team uncovered massive stone pillars.
And when we say massive, we need to be very clear about the physical reality of these objects. These pillars are carved into distinct T-shapes, and they weigh up to 20 tons each.
20 tons of solid limestone hauled and placed into these incredibly precise circular structures. And remember, they had to be extracted and shaped using absolutely no metal tools.
Wait, none at all?
None.
None.
The builders were using harder stones to just chip away at softer limestone. It's a process that requires an astronomical investment of time and sheer physical labor.
And they aren't just, blank, brutalist blocks of stone either. They are canvases. The pillars are intricately carved in high relief.
Yes.
Meaning the stone around the image was physically chipped away, so the figures stand out in 3 dimensions. And the imagery is this incredible menagerie of wild animals. There are depictions of snakes, foxes, boars, birds, and insects. So you have a 20-ton monolith covered in intricate artwork of dangerous wildlife arranged in these massive, deliberate circles 11,000 years ago.
It's breathtaking.
Yeah.
And to understand the magnitude of the disruption this caused, we really need to clearly define the established rules of history, the ones that Göbekli Tepe so violently broke. We need to examine the traditional theory of civilization and the mechanics of why historians believed it was the only way human progress could happen.
Right. This is the 1, 2, 3 sequence most of us learned in school, the inevitable march of progress.
Exactly.
First, humans figured out how to domesticate plants. We developed agriculture. Second, because you can't walk away from a field of wheat if you want it to survive, agriculture forced people to stay in one place. We built permanent settlements, villages, and eventually towns.
Yes, settling down.
And then third, once you were settled, and only after you have a stable food supply, humans developed complex religion and built massive temples.
And the underlying mechanism of that entire sequence is the caloric economy. It is a simple equation of energy. A nomadic hunter-gatherer might spend 8 to 10 hours a day foraging and hunting just to secure enough calories to survive until tomorrow. There is no surplus.
You eat what you find.
Right. But a farmer cultivating a dense field of domesticated wheat can produce tens of thousands of calories in a fraction of the space. Agriculture creates a caloric surplus.
A surplus buys you time.
It buys you specialized labor. The logic dictated that you need a stable population tied to the land, producing more food than they can eat before you can afford to pull hundreds of people away from daily survival tasks. You simply cannot spend 10 hours a day chiseling a 20-ton block of limestone if you are burning more calories than you can forage.
It's basic math.
Exactly. The traditional theory relies on this economic reality. The plow builds the town, and the town builds the temple.
But then Klaus Schmidt uncovers Göbekli Tepe.
Right.
And the site violently contradicts that entire caloric equation. Because here's the twist that sent historians reeling. The builders of this monumental 20-ton pillar site were not farmers.
They were strictly hunter-gatherers.
Now, I have to challenge the timeline here on behalf of anyone listening, because archaeology is an interpretive science. If they were building something this massive, isn't it entirely possible we just, haven't found their farming tools yet? Why are we so absolutely certain they were hunter-gatherers and not just an early agricultural society that left their plows in a different valley?
That is a great question, and it's the exact skepticism many researchers initially brought to the table. But the answer lies in the garbage.
The garbage.
Yes, the evidence for their diet isn't missing. It's overwhelmingly present in the refuse pits surrounding the site. Archaeologists have analyzed tens of thousands of animal bones found in the dirt at Göbekli Tepe. Every single one of them belongs to wild game.
Oh, wow.
Gazelle, wild boar, wild sheep, aurochs. There is zero evidence of domesticated herd animals. And when archaeobotanists look at the plant remains, they find wild einkorn, wheat, and wild almonds, but absolutely no domesticated strains of crops.
So the biological evidence is completely airtight. The people who built this place lived entirely off the natural, unmanaged land. They chased wild game, they foraged for wild plants, they had no agriculture whatsoever.
Which creates a complete logistical paradox. All of our logic about requiring a farming surplus to build a temple is suddenly shattered. The evidence insists that these large-scale religious gatherings, these massive construction projects, existed well before agriculture was ever developed.
And the logistics of that are just mind-bending. I mean, how do nomadic people pull this off? You have no agriculture, you have no centralized permanent food surplus, you don't have a settled city with an established hierarchy of kings and managers. How do you organize, feed, and direct the massive labor force required to carve out 20-ton pillars, drag them across a landscape, and arrange them in perfect architectural circles?
The sheer logistical nightmare of coordinating a nomadic workforce without a centralized food supply is what forced a total paradigm shift. It is the core question that led Klaus Schmidt to propose a completely revolutionary idea. Since the traditional timeline was visibly broken by the stone sitting right in front of him, Schmidt suggested we need to read the timeline in reverse.
He proposed that the temple came before the town.
Essentially, yes. Schmidt's theory posits that the urge to gather for large-scale religious or ritualistic purposes was the primary driver of human civilization. Shared belief brought people together first. People gathered in massive numbers at Göbekli Tepe to worship, to perform rituals, and to construct these monuments. But when you congregate that many hunter-gatherers in one localized geographic spot, you trigger an immediate ecological crisis.
Because thousands of hungry builders will strip the surrounding landscape bare, the local wild game and wild plants would be depleted almost instantly.
Precisely the problem. You have created an artificial population density that nature simply cannot support. So, Schmidt's theory suggests that agriculture did not naturally slowly evolve as a convenient lifestyle choice. It may have been invented later out of absolute desperate necessity.
Just to feed the builders.
Yes, simply to generate enough calories to support the massive crowds gathering at these religious monuments.
Let's visualize this through an analogy. It's essentially like a group of wandering nomads deciding to build a massive state-of-the-art sports stadium in the middle of a barren plain.
Ah, I love that.
They pour all their energy into constructing the arena, but once it's built and tens of thousands of fans show up for the opening game, the builders look around and realize they have absolutely no way to feed the crowd. So they have to frantically invent farming just to run the concession stands.
That analogy perfectly highlights the sheer audacity of early humans. The stadium didn't happen because they had the luxury of concession stands. They were forced to invent the concession stands because their overwhelming desire to build the stadium demanded it. It flips the cause and effect of human progress entirely upside down.
Right.
It wasn't the practical biological need for a reliable food source that settled us down into civilized life. It was a shared belief, an overwhelming religious impulse that forces us to invent farming to sustain the spiritual community.
Which introduces an incredible aha moment about human development. It suggests that religion or shared ritual was actually our first major social technology.
Yes, exactly.
Before farming allowed us to scale up our societies biologically, shared belief allowed us to scale socially. We are primates, and our brains are naturally wired to only manage social relationships with a small tribe, maybe up to 150 people. It's a concept known as Dunbar's number.
Right.
But a shared belief system, a shared temple, bypasses that limitation. It allows thousands of strangers who don't know each other to cooperate on a monumental task.
And that social technology is quite literally carved into the limestone at Göbekli Tepe. But while Schmidt's theory provides a brilliant new framework for understanding our origins, the physical site itself is still guarding massive secrets. The evidence leaves us with glaring gaps that researchers are actively struggling to fill today.
For instance, one of the most baffling details to me is the housing situation. Or, well, rather, the lack of it. Initially, archaeologists found absolutely no clear evidence of permanent houses or domestic life at the site.
Yeah, it appears it wasn't a settlement in any traditional sense. There were no hearths for family cooking, no domestic waste areas typical of a village. It was a destination, a pure, monumental gathering place that people traveled to, utilized, and then left.
That is deeply eerie. You have this colossal, intricate monument that took unimaginable labor and generations to build, but no one actually lived there. Why do people go to such extreme physical lengths to build monumental structures in a place they don't even inhabit?
It deepens the mystery of their motivations. And beyond the motivation, we are still left with the raw mechanical mysteries of the construction itself. We touched on the weight of the stones earlier, but how were 20-ton pillars physically transported by hunter-gatherers who hadn't even invented the wheel?
It seems impossible.
We're talking about moving weights that require heavy machinery today.
Without beasts of burden, without carts, they would have had to rely entirely on human friction, ropes made of twisted plant fibers, wooden rollers, and just brute force. The sheer caloric expenditure of moving one stone a few hundred yards is astronomical.
The logistics of the transport remain a massive engineering puzzle. And perhaps the most enduring question is the actual purpose of the site. We know it was likely ritualistic, but the specific beliefs are completely locked in the past. What did the high-relief carvings of the foxes, the boars, and the spiders actually mean to the people who carved them? Were they warning signs?
Or totems.
Yeah, were they totems of the different tribes coming together? We just don't know.
And the most exciting part of this entire deep dive is that we have barely even scratched the surface of what is actually out there. Excavations are still ongoing, and we are looking at a very small fraction of the total picture.
This is a crucial reality check for anyone trying to understand archaeology. It is a slow, methodical, and constantly evolving science. Right now, only a very small portion of Göbekli Tepe has actually been fully excavated and exposed to the air.
But we know there is more down there. And this isn't just guesswork, right? Researchers have mapped the unexcavated areas using ground-penetrating radar.
Which is a fascinating tool. Ground-penetrating radar, or GPR, works by sending high-frequency electromagnetic pulses into the soil. When those pulses hit something dense, like a buried 20-ton limestone pillar, the signal bounces back to the surface.
Like an echo.
Exactly. By mapping those reflections, archaeologists can basically take a 3D X-ray of the ground without moving a single shovel of dirt.
And when they ran the GPR over the hills surrounding the main excavation, what they saw was staggering. The radar revealed dozens more of these massive circular enclosures, completely buried under the earth, waiting in the dark.
Which means the story is almost certainly going to change again. What is hidden underground right now, once excavated, could reveal new carvings, new structural techniques, or perhaps the very agricultural tools we assumed were missing. The mystery is actively unfolding.
So let's zoom out and synthesize all of this. We've talked about the bizarre discovery, the impossible timeline, the mechanics of 20-ton stones, and this wild inversion of how civilization actually started. But why should you, the person listening to this right now, care about a bunch of limestone pillars buried in southeastern Turkey 11,000 years ago? What is the relevance to the way we live today?
The relevance touches on the very core of human identity. Göbekli Tepe is considered one of the most important archaeological discoveries of our time because it forces us to confront our most basic assumptions about human nature. For generations, we've used human progress as a purely practical, survival-driven journey.
The traditional narrative makes early humans look like pure pragmatists. We settled down into villages because it was a more efficient way to get calories. We built societies because it was biologically safer than wandering the wilderness. We assumed we were essentially biological machines focused entirely on getting full and staying warm.
But Göbekli Tepe shatters that pragmatic illusion. It implies something vastly different about the psychology of our ancestors. It suggests that long before we had comfortable villages, long before we had a reliable, domesticated food supply, we were driven by complex, shared, abstract ideas. We were driven by spiritual yearnings, by a desire to gather, to worship, and to create something monumental that transcended mere physical survival.
It's the difference between humanity as a species of hungry survivors and humanity as a species of dreamers trying to connect with the universe. It completely reshapes how we view the intellect, the imagination, and the ambition of ancient people. They weren't just reacting to their environment, they were actively conceptualizing the cosmos and moving mountains of stone to express it.
And that shared imagination, that overwhelming drive to build a monumental temple, might just be the exact catalyst that forced us to invent the agriculture that sustains the modern world. It is a stunning testament to the power of human belief shaping the physical environment.
It really is. We started this deep dive looking at the neat, orderly progression of history we were all taught. Agriculture, then the city, then the temple. A logical march from survival to civilization. But Göbekli Tepe took that timeline, smashed it to pieces, and left us staring at massive limestone monoliths covered in foxes and snakes, built by nomads who decided to build a sprawling arena before they even had the food to feed the crowd.
It's a completely different story.
It forces us to look back across 11,000 years and see our ancestors not as primitive wanderers waiting for the invention of farming to become civilized, but as complex architects of a spiritual world. The temple didn't just follow civilization. The temple birthed the world as we know it. So I want to leave you with this, to ponder. Did we invent religion because we became civilized and finally had the free time and the caloric surplus to look up at the stars? Or did the overwhelming shared desire to gather, to worship, and to build for the gods actually create civilization? What does it mean for modern society, for the cities you live in and the complex world you navigate today, if our entire human reality was birthed not by the practicality of the plow, but by the impossible ambition of the temple?
It really makes you rethink everything.
Stay curious, stay skeptical.